And she thinks by limiting how much we can save tax-free, she will incentivise us to invest instead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm joined today by Fidelity's Jemma Slingo to talk over some pretty consequential news for savers that was announced in the budget. It has the potential to increase the tax bills of anyone making full use of their ISA allowance. And there's still many questions remaining over how it will work. But don't worry, we'll be unpacking all of it today. Before that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, join the discussion in the comments if you want to do that. It really does help others find what we're doing here, and it means that you'll get new content as soon as it is released. That all said, Jemma, welcome along. First of all, why don't you remind us of what is happening with ISAs? There was a change announced in the budget last month. When does it all kick in and what is happening?
So last month, the government decided to cut the cash ISA allowance. So at the moment, there's the 20k allowance for adults, and you can use that to invest your money or save your money in cash. And you can basically split the 20k any way you want between cash and investments.
Yes.
That's going to change. So from April 2027, there will be a lower cash limit. So you'll only be able to put £12,000 in cash, even though the total number of 20k will stay the same. There's a little bit of complexity because it doesn't apply to absolutely everyone. It only applies to under 65s. If you're 65 or over, you can continue saving away in cash as much as you like, and that 20k still applies to you. But if you're under 65, you'll only have the £12,000 to play with.
Okay, and this is from April 27?
Correct.
And many things to say about this, but importantly, it's not, as proposed at least, it's not for money that already exists in ISAs. It would be for financial years going forward beyond that point. So your £20,000 allowance, if this sort of goes as proposed, the maximum you could put into cash would be £12,000. If you're under 65, changes, and you can still got all that flexibility for over 65s. That exemption for the older cohort, that was interesting to watch. It was sort of presented as another gift or another sort of concession to older people. We know that's a group that, you know, votes in large numbers, often votes in their own financial interest as well. But actually, there probably were some good reasons to have that extra flexibility for those at older ages, right?
I think so. So it's all about timelines, really. If you're 35, hopefully you have several decades ahead of you. You're thinking about your future. You have time on your side to ride out the ups and downs in the market. So there's a reason why you might want to invest in the stock market. We've discussed loads in the past that equities tend to generate stronger returns. So if you're young, you have lots of years ahead of you, you want that growth.
Yeah.
If you're 65 or over, I guess you're in a bit of a different situation. You're probably either retired or thinking about retirement. You'll want perhaps a steadier form of investment, a steadier form of wealth. You know, you don't want to log in and suddenly see your bank balances drop loads if you're 70, say. So that's basically the reasoning behind it. You want things like cash and bonds if you're older, because you won't have to ride out market volatility in the same way. Yeah,
and it's about timelines, yeah, as you say. So, you know, we'll often say don't invest unless it's going to be 5 years plus often. Older people might not feel as comfortable with those kind of longer timelines. And why do you think the government overall have made this sort of change to encourage those at younger ages, presumably, to put their money in the stock market? You mentioned the higher returns that potentially are available on investments. I'm sure everyone that's tuned into this will be kind of on board with that. But from the government's point of view, what do they want to achieve with a change like this?
So it's part of a big push to get Britain investing. So I think Rachel Reeves said in the budget, the UK has some of the lowest level of retail investment in the G7. And she wants to change that, really. And she thinks by limiting how much we can save tax-free, she will incentivise us to invest instead. And that should have good outcomes for individuals because they can grow their wealth more effectively. But it's also part of a push to stimulate the economy. So if we're putting our money to work, we're investing in listed businesses, that's better than just sheltering it in a load of cash. And obviously there is quite a lot of debate about whether that argument rings true, because if you or I bought a global tracker fund, for example, only quite a small portion of that would be going into British stocks.
Yeah.
But I guess there's an argument that, if there's a big cultural shift, people get more comfortable with risk, with investing, that in turn might feed into domestic benefits and, people investing more in the UK.
Yeah, I can see personally the logic of what they're doing. It doesn't feel like the kind of game-changing change. They want to make the UK basically a more attractive corporate environment, don't they? They want companies to come and list here, to raise money here through the stock market, and that's got all sorts of benefits for growth, which obviously the government's got an interest in trying to stimulate. We'll see if this amounts to sort of more than sort of tinkering. But it raises this question of what you can do inside an investment ISA, a stock. We still call it a stocks and shares ISA. I don't know why. I would change that, right? I would change that straight away to an investment ISA. But we have a stocks and shares ISA, and we've said many times here on the podcast that actually there are ways for you to use a stocks and shares ISA, but actually get exposure to maybe not exactly cash accounts, but something very similar. So, what are those methods as things stand for using a stocks and shares ISA in that way?
Yeah, so what you're alluding to are cash funds, which are also called money market funds, but they're basically the same thing. And these are a type of investment, so you would hold them in a stocks and shares ISA, but the returns they generate are designed to be very, very similar to a traditional savings account.
Yeah.
So they roughly track UK interest rates. And they are very low risk. So it's not like you're investing in, for example, emerging markets or the US market.
Yeah.
They are designed to be stable and preserve your capital. And the funds themselves are extremely diversified. So without getting into too much very technical, boring detail, these funds basically invest in lots of different types of very short-term debt.
Yeah.
And those forms of debt are very low risk, and it holds all sorts of different types of debt, which means the funds are diversified. So they're designed to be as safe as they can be.
And it overlaps a little bit with some bond funds, doesn't it? I mean, some of those assets within those funds might be bonds. They might be something similar to bonds. Some funds are called sort of, short duration bond funds, aren't they? So they're sort of in that world or that part of the investing world. Now, there's been some kind of guidance and extra sort of supplementary detail around this change on cash ISAs, which throws some of this into question. So what's been said?
Yeah, so there was some quite quietly published guidance that came out after the budget. And it contained, I think it was 3 bullet points of rules. And these rules were basically designed to stop people circumventing the cash ISA limit of 12k. And one of them was saying that the government would be looking at investments and whether they were eligible to be held in a stocks and shares ISA or whether they were cash-like. And the sentence itself was extremely short, so it didn't provide lots of detail, but it did get us thinking, well, actually, these cash funds, as the name suggests, do look like they could fall within the scope of some sort of government review.
Yeah.
So there is a question mark as to whether going forwards, people will be able to hold them in a stocks and shares ISA.
Yeah.
Again, there were some other rules in there, so we haven't touched on it yet, but some people like to hold uninvested cash in a stocks and shares ISA as a means of, earning some interest.
And have it ready to invest.
Exactly, yeah. Or, if they think markets are getting a bit jittery, they want to take out some of the risks, they can hold some cash there.
Yeah.
And there was also a bullet point in this guidance saying that there would be a new charge on cash held uninvested in a stocks and shares ISA. So the government does seem to be very interested in basically, I guess, filling in the cracks in ways that people could try and, edge around the new rules. Yeah,
because if you think about that overarching aim that they have, they want people to invest in general, but really they would like you to invest in the UK stock market. There has been no stipulation about investments having to be UK investments. But if that's their overarching aim, it doesn't make sense to say, well, yeah, you can have your money in a cash fund, but there are lots of really, really good reasons why you might want to do that. You might have investments. I've been in this position myself. You'll have investments, and then for some reason, maybe you want to buy a house. You want to use that money for some big purchase, and then it makes sense to take it out of the stock market or the kind of riskier parts of the bond market and have it in a different sort of, as something that can't lose money in the short term. And that's where cash funds are very, very useful. And it strikes me that this change is subject to some consultation now, as they tend to be. It will be very interesting, that consultation, because lots of people, I'm sure, in the industry will point out that actually you can call something cash-like, but that's, as you say, those funds are simply they're just a collection of other kind of assets, right? And you could just move up a tiny amount up the risk spectrum to get a still very, very safe return. There'll be ways the industry will adapt to this. I would predict, right?
I would think so. And really, there shouldn't be that long to wait to see what happens, because the government said there'll be this consultation with industry, but they will be laying the legislation that makes these ISA changes in Parliament before April 2027. So, and I think they said something like, we'll be in plenty of time.
Yeah, in good order beforehand.
So it doesn't
yes.
seem like it's going to be a really, really drawn out process.
Yeah.
But that's easy to say that at the starting point.
You wonder if, obviously people use cash funds at the moment, but they have the option of using cash ISAs as well. Let's be honest, right? Well, how many people are we really talking about here? Because over 65 doesn't apply to them anyway. They will be a lot of the wealthiest people with lots of savings. So it's people under 65, with £20,000 a year to put us, up to that, more than £12,000 a year that they want to put in cash. How many people are there in that position? Not that many, I would say. And people with that money often will be investing it anyway. So you wonder if they might just reason, actually, we're fine with the cash fund thing. Maybe, because it's not that big a hit on what we're trying to do. But I guess we're going to see. We've got a consultation between now and April 27. I just wanted to mention one other potential route that people might have for getting a cash type return in their ISA. That would be gilts. Gilts held sort of not in a fund, but held, as a gilt in its own right, and then held to maturity. They're something that will pay a fixed income, won't they? And they're very, very safe.
Yes. So for people who don't know, gilts are government bonds, so UK government bonds. And they are viewed as very safe because you're basically lending money to the government, who agrees to pay it back at a certain point, and you get interest along the way. And the chances of the government not paying it back are thankfully very low. So they're seen as very safe investments, which makes them really popular for people going into retirement. And as you say, if there is this cash crackdown that really does start affecting lots of people's lives, maybe there will be this uptick in interest in gilts because people are looking for alternative ways to generate a nice, safe, steady income stream.
Yeah.
And for people who don't particularly want to get involved in the risk of equities for whatever reason, as you say, maybe you've got a big purchase coming up, maybe you're getting older, you don't want the market volatility. There are loads of reasons why someone might want a safer investment type.
And it changes. I think we've just been through a period when cash funds have become very popular because interest rates are better. But there'll be times like that in the future when then the average investor might say, well, do you know what? I'm not ready to invest. I want to put my money somewhere else for a while because I think markets are really high, or I've got something else going on in my finances that means I don't want to be exposed to that risk. I don't think it will be sort of the appetite for cash will be steady. I just think there'll be periods when it's very, very high, and this change might sort of affect that. Finally, Jemma, before we go today, I just wanted to cover another sort of adjacent change that was announced in the budget, and that's to do with the tax you pay on interest from cash, not in an ISA, and actually on other kinds of income as well. So what's happening there?
Yeah, so in the budget, there was this smorgasbord of tax rises, but within that, there was this tax rise for savings interest.
Yes.
So basically, at the moment, you have the 3 tax bands, all of those tax bands have now been shifted up by 2 percentage points.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you'll now be paying 22%. If you're a higher rate, you'll be paying 42%. And if you're additional rate, you'll be paying 47%. So there's just been this shift up across the board, which again is another way of, I guess, putting people off holding lots of money in cash, whether it's in an ISA or outside of it.
Yeah, and well, it adds just another kind of tinkering level of complexity. You know, if you're a person that's living with the help of kind of cash interest or income from residential property, that applied, and dividends as well. So they're all sort of subject to this extra bit of tax, which kind of takes them away from the tax rates that apply on income or earned income, right? So from work, basically. That's interesting to me because that sort of creates now for the future a target. The government can now change savings tax, it can change dividends tax, it can change property income tax if it wants, and it won't then be affecting everybody at the same time. So it's just another way in which they've sort of opened a door for kind of future tax changes, right?
I think so. And it's always the case with tax. You start with a very, very small change.
Sounds reasonable in the first place.
And then, 10 years down the line, you've got huge numbers.
Freeze a few thresholds.
Exactly. You
exactly.
think, people won't notice. And, often that is a very successful strategy for raising taxes.
Indeed. All right, Gemma, we've covered absolutely loads there, so we'll leave it for now. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. It means that you're going to get updated content as soon as it is released. Give us a like or share the episodes. It really does help people find what we're doing here. That all said, Gemma, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.